All right, so today you have the notes, they're there on every chair, and today we're talking about I discipline my body, the body and sanctification. That's our general topic. And so for this whole series, what we've been doing, our goal has been that you would really believe that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and that truth would transform your life. The subjects we're talking about today with discipline and the body are some of the most ignored subjects. So let me ask you, you don't have to say it out loud, but just think about this. When's the last time you heard a sermon on gluttony? Or when's the last time you heard a sermon on sloth, or sleep, or exercise? These aren't things we talk about very much in church, but they're some of the most relevant things to our daily lives. And so we're going to talk about those things right now, here today. All right, so the very first section is we're talking about the body and sanctification. And just wanted to start with some general but important thoughts about sanctification in the body. So first of all, progressive sanctification is a part of God's plan for all believers. So anyone who's studied a little bit of theology will learn this term, progressive sanctification, how we grow to be more like Christ. We grow in holiness throughout our lives. So we don't get saved through being holy. We're saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. But then as a believer, finishing off Ephesians 2 there, we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works that he prepared beforehand, right? And so God has a plan for us to do good works, to grow in holiness. We see this in 1 Peter 1:16, since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. And that's quoting Leviticus. So this is hopefully not controversial, but all believers should be growing in sanctification in their lives. Can we agree with that? All right. Now, here's the part we often don't think about. Sanctification applies to the whole person, including bodies, or including your body. So if we're supposed to grow in sanctification, we also need to realize that includes our bodies. So 1 Thessalonians 5:23 says this, now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept sound and blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. He who calls you is faithful, he will do it. So here we see that when we think about sanctification, here this passage specifically includes your body. Your body is included in the work of sanctification and being holy for Christ. You know, our entire bodies are moral entities. One way we tend to devalue the body is we don't think of it as much as we should, or it's important as we are. But our bodies, there's a lot of morality around our bodies. I have several examples here. One is our tongues. I'll just read the verses for you. But, or actually, I won't read the verses for you. Yes, actually, I will read the verses for you. I was trying to see if I included them in my notes or not. But James 3:2 says, for we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. And it goes on to talk about the tongue, famous passage on the tongue, and how what we do with our tongues has huge implications for our whole bodies and the lives of others. It's a very moral thing. Our hands. Ephesians 4:28 says, let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone who is in need. So this idea of you can sin with your hands and steal, or you can glorify God with your hands and work. He uses the example of feet, Romans 10:15. How are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach good news. And so there's this idea of using your feet to advance the gospel. You know, one thing that we miss. Sometimes there's weird things in the old Bible that we don't understand because we're in a different culture. But one thing that's really fascinating was back in early Old Testament times, people would claim land by walking the property they just purchased, right? And so if you bought a piece of land, a lot of times the owner gave you their sandals. That was part of buying the land. You also got their sandals. And then you'd walk the land, and you owned that land. And you see this in the book of Ruth. You see this with Abraham, who God tells him to sojourn in the land that he's going to give to his descendants. So why does he have him walk? He walks on it. It's like claiming that land, right? And then you have this idea of how beautiful are the feet that spread good news. Now, that just sounds weird to us in modern days. But if you take in that context, it's the idea of everywhere believers go with the gospel, you are claiming for the Lord. I am bringing God's kingdom wherever I go. Wherever these feet go, I'm bringing the gospel with me, right? And so our feet are moral entities. And then, of course, this should be obvious, but our sexual organs, 1 Corinthians 6:13 says, food is meant for the stomach and stomach for food, and God will destroy both one and the other. The body is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. And that's that famous passage talking about your body being a temple. How he's saying, don't attach yourself to a prostitute. You're a temple for the Lord. And so God wants to sanctify all of you, your soul, your spirit, your body, and that's how you grow in holiness, is all of you. Not a single part of you is exempt. Now, some Christians make the error of idolizing the body. So there's so many ways this happens. So everything from, we had a friend who for a long time got into one of those multi-level marketing things, or we can just call them pyramid schemes, and was selling $70 shampoo, all right? You need the $70 shampoo, right, to make your body look as good as it could. Or there's this thing I saw online, and Alex explained to me what it was. There was this guy, it's a chef channel, and he was touring Japan, and then they did this funny thing, but I guess it's a trend right now where you need to discover your colors, where you have a color expert holds up colors by your face and will tell you what colors match your face and match your skin. And this is very important information so you can maximize how good you look. And so we're very obsessed, sometimes overly obsessed, and idolize our bodies, but it can go further than that. You get it to where you have men who will break the law using illegal steroids, right, to make their muscles larger. Or we have so many people, especially young women, who have eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia. Anorexia being where you are not eating, bulimia where you will eat, but then you'll vomit, or they'll take pills so that, I forget what they call them, but it gives you diarrhea. This is a huge problem. It's a huge problem. Social media has made this a major problem with our young women. Eating disorders have skyrocketed with the rise of social media. And it's so common, I know that it's impacted people in this room. But one way I heard it put is you think about back in the day, before social media and all of this, people would compare themselves to the people around them, right? You had the neighbors down the street, or if you're a young person at school, you'd compare yourself to the most attractive person at school, right? And people are like, oh, that's the prettiest girl, or that's the most popular guy, whatever. But a lot of people learned you didn't have to be the prettiest. You didn't have to be the best looking to be loved and to have friends and to find your place. And life just goes on, right? You don't have to be the best looking person. What social media changed was it expanded people from comparing themselves to their neighbors and just their friends at school to the whole world. And so now you have everybody in the whole world competing to be the most attractive person. And they only, by the way, and it's also, it's an illusion because they only capture their most attractive moments, if you're going to put it that way. You never see their bad side. A lot of times it's even fake because it's edited or whatever. And so now you have these people who all day are looking at hundreds and hundreds of other people's bodies, and they idolize, man, I wish I could have a body like that. And so some Christians are making the error of idolizing the body, and it's leading to all kinds of problems. You know, sometimes people think harshness to the body is a holy thing. Sometimes people think, if I can be harsh to my body, just really abstain. I met a guy once, he's like, I love to beat my body up. And he was a pretty radical person in general. But sometimes people get this idea that it's holy, but the Bible tells us that's not true. Let me read for you 1 Timothy 4. It says, now the Spirit expressly says that in later times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons, through the insincerity of liars whose consciences are seared, who forbid marriage and require abstinence from foods that God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know truth. And so here it's talking specifically about people who are taught, you know, it's good to really hold yourself back, from food. And here he says, this is the teaching of demons. That's what he says right there. And he said, the foods that God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. And there are people who they view food as the enemy. Food is the enemy. And if I want to be holy, I need to not eat. But here that's saying that's demonic because Satan wants to harm your body, where God created foods to be received with thanksgiving. Similar to it, we have Colossians 2. Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. That's a quotation. Referring to things that all perish as they are used, according to human precepts and teachings. These have indeed an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. And so yet a lot of people think, I'll be holy by really beating my body up and really withholding from anything pleasurable. And here this is saying that has no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. And it's crazy how he says here, it has the appearance of wisdom. He's even saying it seems like it might make sense, but he's saying it's not. It has no value. So there's this error a lot of us have of idolizing the body, but there's an opposite error. Many others make the error of ignoring the body. The recommended book we have, it opens up with a story about a young seminarian who was just getting sick all the time and having all these problems, and he went to his professor asking for help, and the professor asked him, well, how's your sleep and how's your diet? And the seminarian was just like aghast. I thought we were going to talk about spiritual things, right? Because he wasn't even thinking about his body. He thought, I just need to like pray enough and be holy enough, and then I shouldn't be worried about the pains and sicknesses I'm having in my body. He's like, no, you should take care of yourself. Different story, but also about a seminary professor. I had a seminary professor who said when he was a young professor, his hero was Spurgeon, the Prince of Preachers. And Spurgeon was known for his work ethic. Spurgeon worked and worked and worked and worked, and he only slept like 4 hours a day. And he would say, there'd be time to rest when I'm in heaven. And so this young professor, he said, so I wanted to be like that. So I worked and worked and worked and worked and said, I can rest when I'm in heaven, so only sleeping like 4 hours a night. And there's one day he was walking down the halls on the university, and he just collapsed, passed out. and he was just sleep deprived. And another one of the professors told him, sometimes the most godly thing you can do is take a nap. And he said he started to rethink, maybe Spurgeon would have lived a little longer if he slept a little more. You never know. It's all in the past. But most of us, I would say many of us in the church, were guilty of not valuing our bodies enough. And I'm certainly very guilty of this. So our goal should be to glorify God with our bodies. How do we find balance? We don't want to idolize our body. We don't want to ignore our body. Is there a happy medium? How does that work? Well, I think it's not about seeing what's bad on both sides and going in between. The goal should be to glorify God. Many of us, we want to have exact rules. We want to have, this is the rules for my eating, this is the rules for my exercise, this is the rule for all the things. If I just do enough rules, then I'll be good. But that's legalism, and that doesn't work. But what we need is a heart that desires to bring glory to God with our bodies, and that's the path to blessing. So our second section here is all about blessing, the body and blessing. The body and blessing. So this is a simple truth here, but it's important. We are created to experience blessings in our bodies. In the book of Ecclesiastes, there's just a few good things. I actually have a poster, a framed poster in my office of all the good things in the book of Ecclesiastes. And there's 6 things. If you've ever read the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a lot of negative things. But when it says something's good, you know it's really good. Because a guy who's saying everything is meaningless, everything's vapor, right? When he says something's good, it's really good. One of the things he says is good is food and drink. He said, this is God's gift to you in this life, is to enjoy your food and your drink. And there's supposed to be pleasure in that. It's a gift from God. It's a blessing from God. And so part of the good life, according to Ecclesiastes, is to enjoy your food. And that's, for some people, that's really easy. Some people, that's really hard. But part of the blessed life is God wants you to enjoy your food. He doesn't want your food to be full of shame. He doesn't want your food to be full of regret. He wants you to enjoy it. Another thing that's good in Ecclesiastes that has to do with our bodies is he said it's good to enjoy your toil. It's good to enjoy your work. Work is super important, and it's good to enjoy it. And that's actually part of the blessed life, is enjoying a good day's work and the satisfaction that comes from it as in this body that we have. When I was growing up, before I had a real job, I had a full-time job called Mom's Garden. And Mom's Garden was like a 40-hour-a-week endeavor every summer among 3 people, which was my mom, my sister, and I. And we were in the garden a lot. That was our summers. People would ask, what'd you do this summer? I gardened. That's what we did. And so I spent hundreds, probably thousands of hours in this garden. And I remember one of the last days I lived at that house before I went off to college. I remember being all by myself, and I was sitting on a bench that I had put together under a weeping willow tree that I had planted, looking at flower beds that I had helped plant and weed and care for all the years. And there was just the sense of satisfaction to that. This is beautiful. And I helped make this, right? And God, He made us. He made us to work and to sense that satisfaction. And there's so many blessings in this body we could recount. Going on a beautiful hike. Getting into a comfy bed. Sexual intimacy with your spouse. cheering on your child as they take their first steps, or seeing your first child born. There's all these incredible moments in your body that God has given us as blessings in this life, and we're created to experience a blessed life in our bodies. Now, our second point here is these blessings are tainted but not destroyed by the fall. God created a blessed life for us, and as you know, it's no longer perfect. It was damaged by the fall, but it was not destroyed. We still get the joy, and both my wife and I, we talk about it, and we remember seeing our firstborn, our oldest daughter, Mary Kate, and the doctor handing us the baby, and like in that moment, your whole life changes. One nurse said, it's like your heart is now on the outside of your body. You know, it's so true. And while that's such a beautiful moment, with the fall, there's now pain. There's a lot of pain in childbirth, right? That satisfaction that comes from good work, you now eat by the sweat of your brow, right? That's what happened with Adam. And so I put it this way, life now, it gives us headaches and backaches, right? So God still wants us to experience blessing in our bodies, even though our work and everything is tainted by sin. The fruit of the trees are still sweet. Spring water still satisfies thirst. And so don't miss out on God's blessings for you in this body by devaluing your body. So let's talk more about where things go wrong. Let's talk more about where things go wrong. Oh, I had a passage here that I missed. Sorry. The body and sin. The body and sin. So, there are 3 deadly sins of the body, and those are lust, gluttony, and sloth. So the 3 deadly sins of the body. We're going to talk more about lust in a future lesson, so we won't talk about that here today. But we're going to talk a lot about gluttony and a lot about sloth. So both of these sins are sins I'm very familiar with, that I've struggled with a lot myself. And I know it's always risky. Whenever you talk about gluttony, you always get people who want to be a little offended and say, well, aren't you the pot calling the kettle black? Right? And I understand that I am not a thin person. But I will tell you this. Let me tell you a little bit about my story. So I really wrestled with these sins in my life. When the heaviest I'd ever gotten, I was 340 pounds, which is about 70 more pounds than I am now. So just imagine me a good chunk wider, right? And that was sinful. It was sinful to be living in gluttony, which led to that. And going hand in hand with that was sloth. My big weakness, my kryptonite, was TV. That was my big weakness. And so I'd work hard at work, and if we had small group or at anything, I was all there. But on the days where there was nothing, get home, eat dinner, and then you know that just like that exhaustion that hits you after work and you eat dinner, I'd be like, I'm just going to sit in my chair. I'll just watch something short. It'll just be like 30 minutes or something, right? Turn it on, and just like that, kids are going to bed. Missed an evening with my kids, or at least they were just watching TV with me. And then the evening was just wasted, just gone, just like that. Now, in both of these things, I've grown a lot. In 2020, 2021, I grew a lot in being healthy. That's where I lost weight. And then I was kept losing weight, and then I moved here, and then I've just kind of like stayed the same. I'm still trying to figure out the whole like Southern cooking thing and how to be healthy, but maybe some of you guys can help me with that. And I grew a lot. We don't have a TV in our living room because it's my kryptonite anymore. And so I've grown a lot. And so I say all this to say, as I'm about to talk about gluttony and talk about sloth, I'm not here as a judge. I'm here as a fellow struggler trying to share biblical truth. So, gluttony, this is my definition. It's persistent overconsumption. It's persistent overconsumption. Here's why I say persistent. So in the Bible, there's times of fasting, of not eating. There's also times of feasting, where they're eating a lot. But then most of life, they're just eating normally. You can put it that way. So there's a category for feasting, and you can enjoy that. It's a gift from God, and it's a blessing. But when you persistently live your life like you're feasting, it's gluttony, all right? You become a glutton. When that's your daily way of life, you become a glutton. And I heard this is really helpful. Gluttony is not wrong because it makes you fat. It is wrong because you trust food for comfort, pleasure, and peace instead of God. Right? So it's an idol, and it's not wrong because of the effects, right? It's wrong because you're trusting food for comfort, pleasure, and peace instead of God. You've replaced God with your idol of food. Now, here's one thing. In the Bible, there's something almost always affiliated with gluttony, wherever we see it. And that's drunkenness. Drunkenness. Gluttony and drunkenness go hand to hand, and they're related. So Proverbs 23 says this, "Be not among drunkards or among gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them in rags." Now this connection here, it's a convicting one, because there's a whole lot of us, and there's a whole lot of preachers who are just ready to go on how evil drunkenness is, right? And we can say, you don't want to be drunk. That's super obvious. And drunkenness is wrong because you are trusting the bottle rather than God. You have stresses, you have problems, and you think, I'm just going to drown it out with this bottle. Or you want pleasure. I'm not trusting God to give me what I need or for God to give me pleasures for more. I'm trusting what the bottle's going to give me. And so it's obviously wrong. But then with food, we end up doing the same exact thing. Now, you can't get a DUI for food, last I checked. And you're probably not going to kill somebody because you ate, right? So there's differences in consequences here, but the heart is the same. It's the same exact heart. The heart is, I am trusting the food for my comfort, for my pleasure, for my peace, instead of God. And so this comes out in all kinds of ways. One is simply in overeating. This is my big struggle. I've never really been a snacker. It's always been another roll. Oh, I can have another one. And how about another one? Or rice. I'm Filipino. I need another scoop of rice. And another scoop of rice, right? And it keeps coming, right? Overeating. Another way this can come out is binge eating. There is this pastor who had to confess to his congregation his addiction of donuts. And so this pastor, he wasn't a particularly heavy guy, but he had a weird problem with donuts. And so he wouldn't eat very much in other meals because he was trying to hide his love of donuts. And when there's no one around, he'd sneak out to a donut shop and he'd order a dozen or two. And he said he could inhale it in like 2 minutes. And he would feel so ashamed. He said, why do I do this? But that's an example of gluttony, right? Binge eating, which is more common than we'd like to admit. Another example of gluttony, I've heard put this way, is treating your body like a trash can. Where you're like, oh, look at all these leftovers. Oh, I can't let them spoil. I got to eat them, right? Or I can't let these cookies go to waste, or this Halloween candy, or whatever, right? And so rather than put it in the trash, you put it in your body, right? And so treating our bodies like a trash can. Another way, another symptom of gluttony is obsession with food. We're planning our entire day around our meals and our snacks. And I think a lot of people have experienced this irrational fear of hunger. It's irrational in the U.S., okay? There are places where it's not irrational. Well, there's times where it's like we're afraid, well, what if I get hungry? Like that'd be the end of the world, right? The famous comedian Jim Gaffigan, he has this bit where he said he was walking the street with a friend and there's this great donut shop. He said, "Hey, you want to go grab a donut?" His friend said, "No, sorry, I'm not hungry." And he goes, "What does that have to do with anything? I haven't been hungry in 4 years." And I think that's, to be honest, most of us, like, we're not in major threat of actually being hungry, but there's this irrational fear, "Oh, I don't want to get hungry, so I gotta eat. Make sure I don't get hungry." So, like we said, food is a gift from God, but when we are gluttonous, we idolize it, and it takes the place of God in our hearts. Let's talk about sloth. Sloth is indifference and weariness toward the work that God has given us. It's indifference and it's weariness towards the work that God has given us. So God made Adam to work and keep the garden. That's what it says in Genesis 2. He made him to work and keep it, and then he made Eve to help him in the working and keeping of the garden. And that's pre-fall. Work is part of God's good plan. And so work is not a result of the fall. Work is not a curse. Work is a blessing that was cursed, right? So it's still a blessing today. It's just tainted by sin. And so when we are slothful and we're not working, it's a big problem. And in our culture today, it's a really, really big problem. I'm convinced that just like culturally, I think that if something's going to take America down, I think it's going to be our own laziness. I think if we have generation after generation of super lazy people, I think that's what's going to take our country down. Sloth is a big problem. I want to spend some time looking at the sluggard in Proverbs 26. So we'll take observations here. First thing, the sluggard says, "There is a lion in the road. There's a lion in the streets." Now you might think, what is going on here? The point is, the sluggard always has an excuse. The sluggard always has an excuse not to work. There are people who are completely able-bodied people who say, "I can't work because it wouldn't be good for my mental health," right? And it's like, yeah, work is stressful, work is hard, but it's actually good for you, right? But people have excuses. Another one, I saw this where there's this gal said she doesn't work because her psychiatrist told her she doesn't get along well with others, so she probably shouldn't get a job, right? Well, what do you expect her to do, right? And people, the sluggard always has excuses not to do the things they're supposed to do. We do this in smaller ways. I'm so busy right now. And by the way, everyone says they're so busy right now, and we might be busy, but we always have an excuse to not do the thing we're supposed to do. I'll get to it when this happens, or I'll get to it when the weather's nicer, whatever it is. There's always an excuse to not do the things you have to do. And then verse 14 says, "As a door turns on its hinges, so does the sluggard on his bed." So the idea here is a sluggard, they move in life, they just don't get anywhere. They're doing stuff, but they're not going anywhere in life. They're just on hinges, back and forth, never getting anywhere, and just turning around in their beds. And so I worked and lived in a homeless shelter where it wasn't emergency housing. It was more of a program for people who wanted to finally no longer be homeless, get their first apartment, get a job, all this stuff. And one thing I noticed was none of the young guys graduated. The whole time I was there, not a single guy in his 20s made it. It was mostly guys in their 50s and 60s who were finally like, the winters are really cold in Michigan. Yeah, I'm ready to have my own place. Yeah, I need help getting there. But what a lot of their story had been was they had just been lazy their whole lives. They wanted the easy life. They didn't want to work, didn't want to answer to anybody. Most of them, that was their story in that homeless shelter that I was at. Now the thing is, there's a lot of people today are raising their kids to be like these homeless men that I lived with, where their kids will just live with them indefinitely, and rather than being homeless, they have their childhood bedroom and all the screens they want and all the snacks they want. Why do they need to grow up? You know, over 50% of people in their 20s live with their parents now, and most aren't moving forward with their lives. So there's some who are moving forward with their lives, who are working hard, but many are not. Actually, most are not. Most are actually going backwards. They're spending into oblivion, racking on debt, and they're further and further away from ever getting anywhere in life. Here we see the sluggard in verse 15 buries his hands in the dish. It wears him out to bring it back to his mouth. Wow, that is a sad description there. But there's a lot of people who they can't even take the effort to take care of themselves or to feed themselves. I saw this show. It was kind of like they do financial interventions with people. And there's this couple who both worked from home, both had full-time jobs, made great salaries, and they were completely broke. And as the reviewer was looking through their spending and their finances, he saw DoorDash 3 to 4 times a day? You both working out, you can't make a PB&J? And they said, we're too busy. We're too busy. We're working, right? Time is money, that kind of thing. He's like, no. He's like, this is why you have no money. You're in debt. Because, I don't know, for those of you who don't understand the DoorDash thing, I just confirmed with an expert whose name starts with a G and rhymes with a referee. And but a Chick-fil-A number 1 is $9.88, okay? If you want to order that on DoorDash, it's like $28, right? This is a huge scam, but everyone does it because it's convenient, right? I may have offended some people who do DoorDash in here. But there's this idea, the sluggard here, it's too hard. It's so hard to make my own food. I just need to pull out my phone and have someone bring it to me, and I'm going to give away my retirement so they can deliver some food directly to my mouth. The sluggard, we see this, and then we see the sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. Here's one of the hard things, is the sluggard tends to know better than anybody else. You try to tell them, a lot of people have seen this with their adult kids, hey, why don't you think about getting a job? And they freak out at them. People laugh because you know it happens, right? The sluggard tends to know better than everyone. They usually think they're the most intelligent and most valuable person in the room. And so here's a question for us is, how should we handle sluggards in the church? There's a lot of sluggards in our culture. How should we handle sluggards in our church? Well, here's what Paul says. Paul says in 2 Thessalonians 3:10, for even when we were with you, we would give you this command. If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. For if we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. Now, with verse 10 here, where he's like, here's my command. If you're not willing to work, let him not eat. Some people might think, that's not very loving, Paul. We need to get him on a program, get him a plan, and help him step by step. He's like, no, let him starve. That's Paul's solution. And so that's why in the church, deacons are important. So deacons help people who need help, right? But we don't want to use all of our church money to help people who shouldn't need help, right? We want to help people help themselves. The classic saying, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man how to fish, he can eat for a lifetime, right? And I have a friend, this friend cracks me up, but he's super, super well-to-do, and he has very strong opinions on everything. And he's like, I'm a very generous person. I love being generous. He's like, so at Christmas time, he said, I love to go to places I would never go, like Taco Bell and Walmart. And he said, and I give the employees $100 gift cards. And I said, oh, why do you do that? And he said, I like helping poor people. I just like helping poor people have jobs. And that was his thing. And that came across so funny, but I love the principle there. Is he's saying, I think people need to work, right? It's important that people are working. So let's think about this. I bring this up because I think this is a very real problem with a lot of people. How do we handle adult children who are sluggards? Especially adult children in our homes who are sluggards. I think some of the best advice is you have to let them experience the real world. I heard a Dave Ramsey call, and does anyone ever listen to the Dave Ramsey radio or the calls where he screams at people on YouTube? It's top tier entertainment, and you get some money knowledge out of it too. But there's this family that was calling. It was about their daughter who's living with them, and she's flunked out of school, isn't working, this and that, and they tried to say, we want to charge her like $100 rent and give her a bill so that she can learn responsibility. And he's like, you are so way past that point. He said, here's what you need to do. You need to sell her phone and say, you don't have a phone. You got to get your own. Get a job. Get your own phone. Pay for your own phone plan. You say, you don't have a car anymore. You need to get a job, get your own car, pay for your own car. He said, you need to let her experience life. If she can't learn it the easy way, you got to let them learn it the hard way. It is not helping them to let them be sluggards their whole lives. And so, for those of us, Alex and I talk about this a lot. Our kids aren't there yet, but we say we want to raise adults, right? We don't want to just raise kids, we want to raise adults. And we were already thinking about, man, after they graduate high school, what's that going to look like with having an adult in our home? How are we going to encourage them to be adults? All right, our last section here, the body and discipline. So we're going to talk about 4 main different topics here. First, eating. We should eat to the glory of God. We should eat to the glory of God. We should be disciplined with our food. And so, for me, when I first started trying to get healthy in 2020, I did the whole calorie counting thing, and that was helpful, but I kind of plateaued. And I think there's a lot of people who've experienced this. I've heard this is a common thing. And I'd lost, it was like 25, 30 pounds, and I was just kind of like stuck there. So that was good. But the biggest difference for me came in not just how much I was eating, but learning about what I was eating. And everybody has opinion on diets, but what I'm going to say here I think shouldn't be controversial, okay? This is a theological statement as much as I can make it. I think all the foods that God made are good foods. So if you have an allergy, then it's not a good food for you. But all the foods that God made are good foods. God made them. He said you're supposed to enjoy them. They're a gift. They're a blessing, right? So where does our problem come from? The more we mess with our foods, and I call these man foods. We have God foods and we have man foods. The more we deviate from God foods, the worse they tend to get for us. We don't usually make things better. We usually make them worse. And so what I learned was if you focus on eating God foods, then you have less appetite, and it's actually easier to have self-control and to be disciplined. And that was one of the most helpful things for me. And so I'd mentioned in a previous lesson, talked about Cheetos, right? Think about this. So the man-made foods, they don't have an incentive to be as healthy as possible. They have an incentive to be as addictive as possible, right? Because they want to sell as much. They want you to consume as much as possible, right? And so being disciplined, however you want to go about it, there's a billion diets out there, but I'm just saying that was one thing that was most helpful for me, was saying, okay, I need to eat less of the fake stuff and more of God stuff, right? And we focused on that. That ended up being the point where people started to say, are you losing weight? I'm like, I'd already lost 30 pounds and no one noticed. But when I started eating healthier foods, things worked way better. It was way, way better. And I love that too, because the focus is not on abstaining, right? Can be dangerous, like some of the Bible passages talked about. It's not about harming, but the emphasis was actually satisfaction. I want to enjoy a good thing God made and not feel bad about it, right? And so we should eat with discipline and glorify God with our foods. All right. Another thing, let's talk about work. We should work with the Lord as our master. We're working for the Lord. So we shouldn't be slothful because we want to please God. Here's some good principles we get from the Bible. We should aim to make enough to provide for our family, to give to the church, and to help the poor. So when we see the commands about money in the Bible, the things that we should be able to do, that we should be able to take care of our family, give to the church, and help the poor. We see about taking care of the family in 1 Timothy 5. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. One of the saddest things is when you have a man who's not taking care of his own family when he can. If he has the ability to and he doesn't, that's a shame. 1 Timothy 5 is very strong. It says he's denied the faith. He's worse than an unbeliever. Look at unbelievers. They work. They provide for their families usually. And so we need to aim to work hard and want to provide for families. And I've told people this. The greatest joy in the money I earn is not in anything that I buy. It's the fact that my kids have a life that they enjoy, right? That my kids have food to eat, that they have all the books and toys that they want. And that's what brings me the most joy, is caring for my family, letting my family thrive. And so we should aim to make enough to provide for our families. We should aim to make enough to give to the church. I don't have to bring up a bunch of passages. We have this All-In series. If you've missed it, you can listen back to any sermon or Sunday school that we've had in the past 3 weeks. But it's important to give to the church, so we should make enough that we can give to the church, and also to help the poor. So many passages, Old Testament and New, talk about the value of helping the poor. And so we want to make enough to help those who are poor. Now, when I talk about this, making enough money, some people feel bad because they are poor. And I'm not trying to make you feel bad if you're poor and it's not your fault. We live in a sin-cursed world. Some people are born with handicaps that have made it hard for them to make a lot of money. Some people have had their spouse die. We have widows who get on hard times. We have people get in accidents. There's all kinds of legitimate reasons that you might not be thriving financially, and that's okay. God cares for you. God loves you, right? And He wants to provide for you through His people. And so for those of us who are able-bodied, it's our obligation, but it's also our privilege to make enough so that we can take care of ourselves, our families, but also help those who have need, especially those who are in the church. All right, let's talk about our bodies here. We should strengthen and steward the bodies God gave us. So God made our bodies to be used. When I was, like I mentioned, I was starting to get healthy in 2020. The first thing I was doing, I was going on walks. We lived in a rural area, and you could go on walks on a dirt road, and you might walk a mile and not see a car. It was great. And there's all these woods, and there was a river. It was the biggest river in Michigan, and it was basically in our backyard. And so I'd walk it, and I thought it was pretty cool. It's like a 20th of the size of St. John's. So when we came here, we're like, this is a lot of water. But anyways, it was beautiful. There's a river. And so I'd walk and I'd hike. And I was coming under conviction about how God gave me this body. I don't want to waste it just sitting in an office and sitting on a chair watching TV. I want to go out and use my body, right? And I'd heard this statement, a lot of people say, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Things you stop doing, your body stops being good at doing. And I was walking in the woods, and I saw over like a little creek that fed into the river, a tree had fallen over, and there's like a little tree bridge, right? I was like, man, when I was a kid, I would have like hung out on that thing and put my hands in the water and walked across it. And I thought, I should try it. And so I remember feeling really conspicuous. I said, I hope there's no one else in these woods to see a 340-pound man trying to balance on the tree. And but I was like, all right, I'm going to balance. I'm going to go out here. I'm going to get down. I'm going to feel this water. It's cold water. It's Michigan. You don't want to fall into it. But I wanted to start walking. I also wanted to get back into sports. So I had all these, not to offend anybody, I had all these old people at my church inviting me to play pickleball. And I found my new favorite hobby, is what happened. And I had people invite me to play basketball. And for a long time saying, no, I'm sorry, I don't play basketball anymore. I'm like, okay, I'm going to play basketball. People invite me. I even played volleyball once and totally embarrassed myself. But I thought, I need to exercise. So I worked out in the gym for a while and that kind of thing too. But we should steward the bodies God gave us. Why give up on the abilities that God gave us? Things that when I was a teen were easy, right? And so I've heard it put this way. People talk about health span versus lifespan. Has anyone ever heard this before? Health span versus lifespan. So you could live to be 90, but be stuck in your house for the last 30 years of your life, right? So you could have a long lifespan, but not have a long health span. And so stewarding your body, exercising, staying strong, right, is part of having a long health span where you're able to do things. And that's important for God's kingdom. There's two guys I know who go out multiple times a week at UNF to share the gospel with college students in their 70s. And there's some guys in their 70s who couldn't stand outside for 3 or 4 hours. They just couldn't do it, right? And so God bless them for doing that. There's a lot of retirees who go become a missionary or go on a lot of mission trips. And they're using those years for the kingdom of God. But if there's a lot of people who are retirement age who aren't healthy enough to do that kind of thing anymore. And I don't want to just pick on those who are older, but there's a lot of young people. They don't have the energy to volunteer, the energy to help somebody move in the church, the ability to help people because they're so unhealthy and they have no energy. Last thing, I'll go through this real quick. We should sleep and rest as God designed us to. So we're living in a sleep epidemic. 40% of our country is sleep deprived, and most don't get enough sleep. And this is all kinds of problems. From you can get in an accident while driving, but sleep deprivation is related to heart disease, metabolic disorders, your immune system, cancer, neurological diseases. And so we need to sleep. God designed us to sleep in these bodies. That's one piece of advice you should not take from Spurgeon. And we're made to rest. And our problem is we've traded rest for entertainment, right? The main reason people are sleeping less is because of these blue lights that we stare at, that are our screens, right? I just thought I'd bring this up. I've been learning a lot about Charlie Kirk in the last couple months, but them talking about his life. And they said one of the most unique things about him being a very productive person is he loves sleeping. And he'd say that's actually part of the key. So he said he had a solid 8 hours a night. where a lot of people who have like 1,000 employees couldn't have imagined that. And his employees knew you can text him or call him, you're not getting anything back because he's sleeping, right? And so we need to value sleep so that we can do it, glorify God in these bodies. So I want to end with a question. What areas of discipline of the body do you need to grow in? We've talked here just now about eating, working, exercising, sleeping. And I want to encourage you, so I look at this list and I kind of think, all of it. I need help with all of it. But I encourage you, pick one area to really start working on. And try to set a goal, like a short-term goal, like a 60-day goal, end-of-the-year goal, that kind of thing, in one of these areas. And what actually happens is they're all related. You start growing in discipline of your body in one area, it actually helps you with the rest. And so people decide they want to start exercising. Man, I'm tired. I need to go to bed. People who start exercising tend to be more conscious of, I want to fuel my body with good food, right? And it can go all sorts of ways, but focus on one thing and it can help you with the rest. So in conclusion, our encouragement here is it's not a downer. It's not, all right, be ashamed and be more disciplined. No, God wants you to have a blessed life. Yes, it's hard. Yes, there's pain. Yes, this is a sin-cursed world. But God created a blessed life in this body, and he wants you to enjoy it. And the way to enjoy it is through discipline and glorifying him. So let's glorify God in our bodies together. Let's pray.